Hello everyone, welcome back to the Untitled Model Project. I'm your host Tanner Dykstra, joined as always by my two bullseye-hitting palaroonies, Tucker Hazel and Abram Buhner. We are here today to talk about Hawkeye in its entirety. We're doing a series review, we're talking about episode 5 and 6 particularly, but we're also getting Abram Buhner's thoughts on the whole series because he's not been here on these typical recaps. But yeah, we're going to talk about the finale, we're going to talk about all the hot reveals, what we think of the series as a whole. If you want all that and more content on Marvel shows, Marvel movies, video games, what have you, you should subscribe to Backlog Banter. You should join the Discord, that link's in the description, and give this video a like, ring the bell, all the typical YouTube stuff, because we want you to see our beautiful faces day in and day out.
Yes. Backlog Banter propaganda. We want you.
We want you to see our beautiful faces.
And it's got Uncle Sam clicking the subscribe button for Backlog Banter.
That's great. We should make that. Copyright. No one else can steal that.
In Roblox.
Yeah. Abram, since you've not been on these, I'd like you to start. What do you think of the finale Hawkeye series?
Okay.
Give me your general thoughts.
So here I am, Tanner. I'm sitting in the fucking hospital room. Just got my COVID booster, and they're keeping me under fucking lock and key for 15 minutes.
Correct.
So I'm brainstorming what my statement is going to be, and I came up with a Christmas themed analogy.
Ooh, ding dong, ding dong.
So you get a nice Christmas gift maybe from a grandmother, and then afterwards you have to write a thank you card, right? Yeah. And you start the thank you card and you feel like you got a lot of space on that page. So your handwriting's pretty big. But as you get deeper into that card, you realize you're running out of room here. So you gotta start cramming. You gotta start fucking cramming to get to that sincerely Abram Buhner at the bottom of the card. And I kind of feel that way about Hawkeye. Okay. I think that we took way too much time in those first 2 episodes to accomplish incredibly little. And then with the knowledge that we only had 6 episodes, we started to cram more and more and more into those back episodes. That said, this is my favorite piece of Marvel content since Captain Marvel.
Really?
I genuinely love Hawkeye. I think it is flawed pretty critically from a pacing angle, as I want to talk about, but I think it has so much heart. I think it has such a unique tone. I think it does a nice job of capturing a different angle of the Marvel Universe, more jokey stuff of the Matt Fraction run, while at the same time anchoring it with what I think is some of the best emotional moments we've gotten from the MCU in quite a while. I love Clint. I love Kate. I think that Yelena's unpacking of Natasha'S death with Clint was awesome too. In an era where I think Marvel movies are way too encumbered with other characters' storytelling, Far From Home, No Way Home to an extent, this felt perfectly balanced between centralizing these characters and expanding and closing off, paying closure to other elements of the MCU. I think the show is fantastic in spite of its issues.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
As all things should be. Except for that is just not true.
Not true at all.
That's the exact opposite of what he was saying. But I do think that I agree on the whole. When you talk about how this series utilizes the history of the Marvel Universe for the establishment of its characters, I do think it's not on the same level, but pretty close to what we enjoyed so much about Spider-Man Homecoming. Card in the corner, if Tanner remembers.
I'll remember.
Is that it uses a lot of the history of the MCU's events to create something that's very relatable for us as Marvel fans to why we know Kate Bishop to be a certain way with her history and why she reveres Clint Barton. Yelena's experience having seen everything with Natasha in it and Black Widow and Endgame and all these things, we know what to expect. And I think that allows us to get into a lot more characters than maybe the show needed. But on the whole, it actually is surprisingly good at giving us an ensemble cast, because this is not just a Clint Barton story. And to some extent, it's not just a Kate Bishop story either, although I would obviously say she's the focus, but we get a surprisingly large amount of development and involvement from both Yelena Belova and Maya Lopez, who I think is the surprise highlight of this show for me. And the way that they're able to balance all 4 of those characters and give them involvement and emotional weight, and to the show's credit, have that last episode play out in a way that is pretty good in terms of how many storylines are going at once. I felt like they did a reasonable job handling it. I do think there were some moments that could have not been cut back and forth so much. But I'm happy this show ended as well as it did. I do think that you're right. One of the things that I was talking about in our season premiere review and our mid-season review is that good Lord, they have a lot of characters in this show. They got a lot of villains. They got a lot of antagonists. How are they going to wrap this up? And they actually did it surprisingly well. And I'm pleased with all the inclusions of everyone. But this is another one of my favorite pieces of Marvel content this year. This is my second favorite Disney Plus show so far. Falcon and the Winter Soldier still above that for me. But I'm so happy that one of my favorite characters of all time, Kate Bishop, is now a part of this. I think everything that she did in this show is just fantastic. And I'm more excited and interested in the ground level storytelling of the MCU now than I was before, because I am very invested in Maya and Yelena and Kate, and to an extent Clint, though I think his story is for the most part over. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Tanner.
Well, funny you say that, Tucker, because I'm glad you guys could go on such a long, complex opening statements about this, because like I just think it's pretty good. Like, I don't have a lot to say about the series as a whole. I think it's good. I think it's fun. I like a lot of the things in it. I like the characters. I like the ground level MCU stuff, like you guys were saying. I think the only thing that falls short of that, like, just pretty good mark is, like, the actual plot of the series. Like,
sure.
the Eleanors and the Jack and the mystery and the who, whats, and the what have yous. But ultimately, across the board, I agree with all the positives and even the critiques that you guys had so far. But I want to start out with episode 5 and 6, particularly episode 6, because that's the finale that just came out today. And I want to talk about, first thing I want to talk about is the big reveal of the whole series is Kingpin. How did you guys think that Kingpin was sort of, do you guys think he was utilized pretty well? Because, I mean, I liked him, but also, there's it's full spoilers for this, by the way.
Naturally.
Did they kill him? Is he dead?
No way in fuck. This is a Saw moment if I ever seen one.
Yeah.
If you don't see him get shot on screen, he is not dead.
Sure.
She fired that gun by his ear. She fired it into his fucking foot. She shot a trash can. Whatever. Mm-hmm. They did not kill Vincent D'Onofrio Kingpin after one in a millionth episodes of content. No fucking way.
So I didn't watch any of the dumb Netflix shows. Sorry, everybody.
Neither did I.
So I had no attachment to his Kingpin.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, hey. Also, I watched these episodes late, so people on Twitter cannot fucking control themselves.
No.
So I knew what happened in these episodes in terms of the reveal. So I was like, oh, there's Kingpin. Kingpin's a cool character. Big fan of him in the Spider-Man PS4 games, for instance. But I think he is very much emblematic of the fact that this entire series needed to front load a little bit more information.
Sure.
Because by the time Kingpin is revealed, we're also at the same time recontextualizing Jack and Vera Farmiga, Eleanor, and it's like that's what we're invested in. We're invested in Kingpin because that's what we're supposed to be invested in.
Yes.
But we're invested in Kingpin because we're Marvel fans, not necessarily because we're Hawkeye series fans.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, I think it just basically leads to a boss battle for Kate,
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I thought was pretty good.
It's a good fight.
Yeah.
It is a good fight
it's
because, and here's the thing. I think his inclusion in the show overall is very exciting to me, because just the idea that we now have a ground level big bad to fight. Like, Kingpin is a very important character in the comics. Obviously, he has a lot of influence, and he's also very strong. I really love how they just leaned into like the superhuman bodily mass of Wilson Fisk. I fucking love that. But I'm very excited for him to be included, because now we're not just dealing with, tracksuit mafia or our politics guys or whatever. Kingpin is an engaging ground level villain that I can't wait to see. Again, he's not fucking dead. See, brought up in the Echo series, which is coming up, possible season 2 for Hawkeye, though maybe not, because we didn't get a tease for that at the end of this, unlike Loki, or Daredevil show, or he could show up in a future Spider-Man movie or whatever. But I'm excited to have that kind of character integrated into the Marvel universe.
Yeah. I do want to bring up quickly, since you talked about his strength, Tucker. I do think that they significantly powered him up for his actual forefronting inclusion in the MCU.
He ripped off a fucking car door.
Yeah, well, the classic Kingpin. They throw in a little Daredevil reference with some car door action there. What, you guys haven't seen Daredevil? I think I've only seen the first season. But there's a pretty gruesome scene with the car door in one of the first few episodes of that season one. But yeah, I think, like I said, I liked his whole fight with Kate Bishop. That's her name. Thank you very much. I mean, I felt like that. Yeah, I think they also maybe gooberized him a little bit. He's wearing the big Hawaiian shirts and he's got his big fedora on and stuff
He's
like
got
that.
he's got a funny little hat.
He's got a funny little hat. But I like you. I agree with you, Tucker. I'm excited for his inclusion in the rest of the Marvel series, as well as you brought up at the end, Tucker. Kate Bishop being big, maybe getting a season 2. She's for sure going to be in some future Marvel stuff. I think that this series is a very good setup for the rest of her character. We could talk about the ending of her arc for this series, or her arc over the entire season 1. But what do you guys think?
If I can actually say one more thing related to Kingpin before we transition there.
Yeah.
The Kingpin fight for me is emblematic of one growth across the series I was really happy in, which is the action department.
Sure,
I think that the action in the first 2 episodes in particular is bad. I think it is shot poorly, and I think it is uninteresting. Choreography-wise, conceptually, but by the time, I think that the trick arrow car chase in episode 3 is pretty fun, but I think by the time we get to that final a confrontation on the ice rink and then into the Kingpin fight and everything, like, that's
my favorite fight is the Clint and Maya one in episode 4.
In the department store thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one the fight between him and her when he's in the Ronin costume is really great too.
Yeah.
Because they could put a body double in the Ronin costume and have her in shadow, so you can have people who actually could do action sequences. So there's a lot of in camera still, like, wide shots, which I appreciated. I think that the show honestly was, from a fundamental level, in my opinion, was pretty shaky those first couple episodes.
Sure.
But I think it got a lot better by the time we reached 6.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. And I think that is because, for me, the relationship between Kate and Clint is obviously the core of this show. And for those first few episodes, when they hadn't gotten their ground level yet of, okay, they didn't have Lucky. Well, no, actually, she got lucky in the first episode, but they didn't have, like, the home base of her fucking aunt's apartment or whatever. They didn't have the supporting cast fleshed out. We didn't really know what the end goal of the threats against them were going to be, and obviously they didn't have their sea legs in terms of their dynamic yet. It did feel a little bit shaky, and I'm excited to go back and rewatch them, as I probably will in the course of the next week. Those earlier episodes. And see if there is more there that I might have missed. Because one thing that I do certainly appreciate about these Marvel shows is that in retrospect, you can go back and watch them and realize what they're setting up, things that might not have been apparent in those first few weeks. But I think all of this comes back to Kate Bishop, who is the highlight of the show. Maya is the surprising highlight for me, but I expected to enjoy Kate Bishop in the show because she's one of my favorite Marvel characters, and the dynamic between her and Clint in the comics is something that I absolutely adore. But the way that they utilize Kate Bishop as a character, as we're transitioning to discussing her, as a fangirl of superheroism, in a way that she really looks up to superheroes, and it inspires her to be a better person, and she's able to sort of put her own spin on what it means to be a superhero and deal with the consequences that come with that. I think that her arc through this is the best part of the show, I think, bar none.
Yeah, I think that's really highlighted in the final sort of speech that her mom gives her before she's arrested, in that, like, I think that really cements the fact that Vera Farmiga will probably not be coming back. Maybe in, like, a season 2, but certainly not in, like, a Kate and Eleanor teaming up or coming back together as mother and daughter again, because it really cemented the idea that Eleanor does not understand Kate's sort of path towards superheroism anymore. Yeah. She's like, you're not responsible enough. You can't take on all of this all of this weight, and you don't care about the consequences of things. Wherein over the course of the show, of course, we've seen Kate Bishop maybe start out as that. You know, she destroyed that whole bell tower to her ending in episode 6, right? Yeah, episode 6, where she is very fully aware of the consequences and sort of the responsibilities that she has, and the weight of being involved in this sort of world. Especially, you know, she learned a lot of that from Clint and like his whole figuring out that he was Ronin, which I thought was very good. And yeah, just speaking overall about their dynamic, we talked about this in our mid-season, but I think they share a lot of the the most emotional sort of most emotionally resonant things I've ever seen in the MCU, and which I thought was really surprising for the Hawkeye show.
This is why I love the show as much as I do, because first of all, I think Haley Steinfeld is fantastic, but it's actually Jeremy Renner as Clint that cinches the show for me.
Okay.
He was the star. I think that what he brings by his own right is a really like kind of tortured and interestingly compelling character who actually has time to, unlike basically any other character for the most part outside of Spider-Man, but the tone of Spider-Man doesn't really allow it, sort of unpacking Avengers, unpacking the Blip and Endgame. And I think Jeremy Renner is an accomplished enough actor that you can see a lot of that just on his face. I think he brings an older and like cynical and jaded perspective to the show, which makes it really truly compelling. I love him in here, and he's quickly become in the MCU, I think, one of the best characters. So it's unfortunate that I think he's probably going to be underutilized moving forward if we even see him again.
I don't think we see him moving forward, quite honestly.
Yeah,
or
probably
at least
not
in any meaningful sort of sense. He might crop up for a moment.
How I see him is whatever Kate shows up in next, which is not even confirmed. We don't have any track going forward for what her character is going to do. But I see, if it's a season 2, if it's an inclusion in some large movie, a scene or two between her and Clint about, okay, you can use the name Hawkeye. I'm leaving the game. Honestly, I kind of expected that to be a post-credits of this or something like that. And frankly, the inclusion of Rogers the Musical instead of a traditional future setting up post-credit sequence is one of my biggest disappointments with this show. Also because I didn't think it was that funny. I really found that Rogers
have a heart. Come, they're just having a little fun with it.
Fucking annoying. It's so
you
annoying.
can skip it then.
Here's what I'll say with post-credit scene.
Yeah.
I scrubbed through to find it, thought it was Rogers the Musical, and just closed Disney Plus.
See,
I should have done that.
If you don't have a heart for musical theater like me.
Oh no, I watched something and didn't like it.
But I actually think that's important.
Because I'm sorry for making a joke, Tucker.
The heart is really important. That's why the show, where I was going with the Clint stuff, is that his personal trauma that he's working through plays off of Haley Steinfeld's young optimism very well.
They've got an intersecting thing, which I do think makes both their arcs very satisfying. It's actually kind of equally compelling and satisfying to see jaded Clint Barton, who has been a guy with a stick in a string dealing with fucking aliens for 10 years and has been a vigilante and all this stuff, coming to realize that there is a hopefulness to heroism, and he can be inspiring, and you know, it can be returning to his roots of having fun and not everything is as dour as it is. Kate is able to teach him those things, and the way that they bounce off of each other and sort of are able to meet in a nice middle ground where they're still on their own pages. Like Clint is still very jaded and Kate is still very headstrong and silly about stuff, but they come together in a very nice way where you can feel them impacting each other through the course of the show.
What I was going to say was that I also, speaking to that point, I enjoyed that it came back to those two as individuals, because there was lots of conversation towards the middle of this series. I think episode 3 or whatever, they're walking down the street and they see people dressed up as the Avengers, and she's talking to him about like public image and stuff like that. So I kind of worried that it was going to end with this sort of thing of like the public accepting Hawkeye as like, oh, he is our hero, and Clint having to accept that. But no, I do like that they part it down to Kate looks up to Clint as Hawkeye. He is the one who inspired her to sort of go down this path of superheroism, and he recognizes that he can be that for one individual person, and that's all that matters. I like that they pared it back down to that and didn't make it some like big public image. Hawkeye realizes that he's an inspiration for millions of children across the world sort of thing. It's an individual thing, which I like.
That would have been a really Yeah, that would have been a sharp turn of direction
Yeah.
for like, something of Clint Barton in fucking Times Square, and everyone's
Exactly.
like, yeah!
Exactly.
No, that
Yeah.
wouldn't have made any fucking sense.
No.
We get those character moments. Like,
Mhm.
I think one of the best scenes, if not the best in the entire show, is when Kate comes back with all of the like the pizza and the Christmas stuff, and they have the movie marathon,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
they talk, and he teaches her like the flicking the
The
whatever,
coin. Yeah.
the coin, which a great payoff for that in the fist fight.
Yeah.
I thought that felt really earned, but just giving these characters time to talk
Yeah,
is
no,
is
100%.
so fantastic.
Mhm.
That's when I think Marvel is usually at its best because its characters are so interesting.
Yeah.
And the action is usually not that well choreographed. So let me like talk to these characters and learn more about
Mhm.
them. And when the show does that, it just really, really fires. And
Yeah.
And
It's-
Abram Buner, I
great.
hate to do this to you, but guess what? A lot of these shows are that. The Disney Plus shows are kind of what you're looking for. And as this is
Yeah.
the first show that you've watched at all, I believe, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on something like Loki that does unpack multiple realities through its
Yeah.
characters, and Falcon the Winter Soldier, which I think does a great job of larger level MCU stuff impacting people on a personal level. This I think is another great entry point into that. Of
yeah.
learning about characters through a lot of just them sitting in the fucking apartment and Clint sewing up Kate's wounds or putting fucking peas on his head, or them just being people or worrying about Christmas, worrying about what's going to happen. That I think is another reason why the show is as compelling as it is. And one reason that I love superhero content is putting people who are relatable in their personal struggles into wildly ridiculous scenarios that enhance and heighten the drama of day-to-day life. This show is a great example of that because they are just people. They're doing stuff that you and I will presumably never see. I don't know what your plans are for the next 20 years. But it all ends up coming back to Clint wanting to get home with his family and worrying about their protection and stuff like that. The fact that the stakes are pretty low, all things considered, for this show. I mean, it really is just the two of them on the line and Clint's Christmas with his family. It's kind of refreshing.
That's why it's so good.
Well, what I was going to say was there's also something else on the line, Tucker, and that is special guest star Linda Cardellini's history as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent is going to get out, which is what the Watch sort of plotline ended up being, which is that's fine, I guess. I don't know. I expected something bigger, to be honest with you, but it's fine.
Man, I just found it really refreshing that there wasn't any of this garbage in this show. It was
that there wasn't a secret there wasn't a secret shrunken down Pym lab inside of that watch or something like that.
No, there wasn't like one of fucking like Wolverine's broken off claws stuck in the wall.
Oh my god!
It was like this was a contained story, and that made it so refreshing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what makes it doubly refreshing is that it's a really good Christmas special. Yeah. I thought that the Christmas stuff was going to be largely just set dressing, and it is for a while. But then I think we get into, first of all, a lot of really great needle drops of Christmas songs. I think that the Grinch
one is my favorite. It's my favorite.
That is really fucking good. But then even having like the Rockefeller Christmas tree be shot down, there's a lot of fun stuff here. Fighting on the ice, they really used the setting very well, and I frankly see this as a show that I would revisit around this time of year.
Sure,
because they do a great job of capturing that spirit too, which I think is really effective.
Mm-hmm. I think there is also an element of, like you said, Abram, there's this rewatchability and, the fact that it's contained, because after No Way Home, some people, which takes place, I think the ending takes place around Christmas, there were some people being like, oh, is Spider-Man gonna show up? Oh, is Daredevil gonna... spoilers for No Way Home, I guess.
If you're watching a Hawkeye spoiler review, you've fucking seen No Way Home.
Okay, yeah. Spoilers.
Also, everyone's already seen No Way Home.
Is Daredevil going to show up? Yada, yada, yada. But I do like that they didn't do that. That this has that rewatchability, that timeless factor where it takes place after the blip and all that, but it's sort of in that timeless void afterwards where, you don't have other heroes flying through the sky. They don't timeline it with and this thing happened at the very end, which ties into the Marvels or whatever,
No, I agree completely. What I actually thought was going to happen at the end when she's getting the shit beat, when Kate's getting the shit beat out of her by Fisk at first.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were going to have not Hawkeye. I thought we'd have Daredevil swing through, and I thought it was going to turn out to be like the end of Mandalorian season 2, where Luke shows up as just fucking out of nowhere to save the day, and my eyes just go cross-eyed because then all of a sudden the finale is no longer like a story; it's just a way to show you something you know.
Mm-hmm.
But this show really, I think, has a great amount of restraint in that respect. Like, yeah, we see the fraction suits and they look fucking cool, but Clint's like, yeah, I put it on, I'm wearing the suit, and that's what you get. And if you know what he's wearing, it's cool, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. I think it does a really nice job handling its fan service.
Yeah, for sure. I really thought that they would play even just a tad into the fact that the synergy between the release of No Way Home and this last episode presumably take place within like a week of each other. It's unclear. The Rockefeller tree is still standing in the end of No Way Home, which I did not think it was going to fall over in this. So that kind of messes up my theory there. But I do wish that there had been maybe something about, last week the Statue of Liberty shield thing fell off or something like that. Like, I do think that they could have played slightly into, even if just a reference into the fact that they are releasing these at the same time and presumably they take place around the same time. Because one thing that I do appreciate about Phase 4 is that they are building a lot of things happening around the same time, that as a fan, it can be very satisfying to stay up to date on that, which is just a different side of playing into that kind of storytelling. But I'm glad that we didn't have to force Daredevil into the end of this, because we don't need another fucking character in the end of this dumb fucking show. Because frankly, and as I kind of want to get into episode 6, I do think that there is a slight problem with the amount of storylines going on at the end of this show. Maya gets her redemption or her realization, which I think is a great way to sort of bring that character back to sort of a middle ground and not be a pure antagonist. And so I'm happy that played out the way it did, but it was just another one of the storylines of, okay, Clint is fighting Yelena on the ice, and we're going to cut away from that for a little bit. And Kazi and Maya are fighting over here, and Kate is looking for Eleanor, and then Fisk shows up, and there's the firefighters from the LARPing thing dealing with the fucking people, and Jack is sword fighting on the fucking steps.
On God!
That was really funny.
It was funny. He kills many men in that scene.
He slices them across the chest.
Yeah, he kills them.
I do think that while I think most of it was handled very well, I wish that we had maybe had one less thing to cut to, because it did feel a little bit jarring at times to be like, wait, hold on. Yelena's about to shoot Clint in the fucking head, and we don't see that for like 5 minutes or whatever. It's like, I really want to know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, that's the problem of the show not spending enough time in those first 2 episodes building stuff up.
Yeah. Oh, I suppose we should probably talk about Yelena in this as well.
Yes, we definitely have to.
I think the whole conversation with her and Hawkeye about Black Widow, it de-escalates that situation nicely. I could critique it, but like it's fine for what the show is, quite honestly.
I think that I really love the Yelena stuff.
Yeah.
I did not have any. I frankly had no clue what Kazi was really fighting over when he gets killed. I didn't really fully even understand how he got killed. She like twists his arm back and he stabs himself with the arrowhead. I guess.
I agree.
But like, I think you could. I honestly think. What is the deaf girl's name? I don't even know.
Maya Lopez. She's
Maya Lopez. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a character I'm not familiar with. I frankly think you could have cut her out. I think you could have. Yes.
Well, she's getting her own show.
Oh, of course. So yes. God forbid.
Yeah.
but I think that because if you're gonna do the like kind of over encumbered Eleanor storyline, which I think is important to Kate's development, I think you bring Kingpin in earlier. And it's Kingpin and Yelena are the 2 like main antagonists, and the Tracksuit Mafia is there as like goons, pretty much.
And that's what they are there for.
Yes. Give the cannon fodder.
That's what they're there for. But then that also introduces Kazi and Echo, and I think that just adds a little bit too much, because that's a lot to unpack by its own merit that I don't think we quite had time for. So Tucker, I totally agree with you. I think adding either don't add Kingpin or don't add Kazi and Echo. Well,
here's the thing. I think Kazi is the needle that broke the camel's back, or whatever the fuck. Needle in the camel back, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. It's the needle in the haystack that broke the camel's back. Yeah.
but I think he's the part that I was least invested in. I became more okay with the way that they were handling Jack and Eleanor through the course of the show. I do think that Eleanor and Kate's relationship, how that twists so over at the end, and Kate is sort of able to say, "Hey, no, you are my mother, but I know what's best in this situation. Like you went way overboard." I think that's handled nicely. But I would say that personally, I think Maya is integral to one of the themes of this show, which is that everyone has this dark past and they are to some degree just fighting for themselves. Like there is a blurring of the lines between who's a hero, who's a villain, what this means, and what you're fighting for personally. And she's the complication of that, and in a way that I think is handled very well. The way that she represents the part of Clint's past as Ronin and the impact that he had as that character, which we didn't see except for 2 minutes in Endgame, that I think is very compelling. I think her origin story that we saw in the beginning of episode 3 is handled fantastically.
No, you're
I
right.
agree. I love that character.
That's a good point.
And the way that she ties into this greater conflict between powers of Fisk and Ronin, and she's sort of caught in the middle of this, and how she also ends up sort of teaching
totally
Clint about his disability and how he needs to be able to be okay with that. She's a very core part of this story, and I think she's an interesting enough character, both from her acting, which I thought was phenomenal, and just conceptually of sort of a martial arts character with the amputee leg that she can use to her advantage, and her deafness that she also ends up using to her advantage a few times. I think she's very, very compelling. Kazi, on the other hand, as I'm trying to say, he's just so sort of another part of her that allows her to communicate with other people. But he's not that interesting. He's like the inn to the Tracksuit Mafia, but I think the Tracksuit Mafia is fun because they don't have an inn, and because fucking Ivan and Tomas and all these guys are just goons. Like, we don't get just goons almost ever in modern day superhero stories. So he kind of he's the complication that I think should have been removed.
No, I think you're totally right. I agree with you. You're right.
I like that Ivan went to Maroon 5 instead of Imagine Dragons, because Maroon 5 is a better band.
I will say that I think that as the show goes on, the humor gets a lot better. I really did not find episode 1 and 2 very funny at all. And we got a little bit of that came back with the Maroon 5 bit, even though it was kind of a cute callback. But I think that they actually integrate, I found the LARPing stuff so fucking annoying at the beginning of the show.
I could see where you're coming from with that, yeah.
But by the end, I think that those characters end up fitting nicely in. So I think they pay off a lot of the kind of stuff that I found really not compelling about the show at the beginning. So from that lens, I think it's good. But even if you cut out the LARPing stuff, that's at least one other element you could have taken out and reshuffled around time. It's an issue of time, I think, in this show.
Now, one thing that we've neglected to talk about throughout this review is the actual plot of the series, which I think is a pretty good indicator of where the ranking of interest is in the various aspects of this series. Because, like I said, that is the one thing that I'd say is less than pretty good. I'd say it's average. I don't know, quite honestly. I don't care, quite honestly.
I think the reason that I will probably never again think of the actual plot that is fueling all of this is because it is just sort of backgrounded, generic people having tricking each other into
shadow corporations and who's paying who and who's working for who, and
which I don't find particularly compelling. I think what it does is exist to get overshadowed. It exists to be the impetus, the catalyst for character conflicts, for Kate and Clint to meet, for Yelena to get involved, for Maya to have a conflict with Clint again. Like, all this stuff spawns out of that. And so, frankly, I don't give a piss about it. I do think it could have been more interesting. And for the vast majority of the show, if not the entire show, I was pretty let down by anything involving Eleanor and Jack. I do think they're one of the weaker elements of the show in terms of how compelling they are. And I think that's because the idea of Eleanor running the business in the background and it maybe being Jack, but then maybe not, but then he's kind of just a guy and he goes to jail. All this stuff is weaker than the rest of the elements, frankly. And so I'll just never think about it again. And frankly, it'll probably never be important again.
True.
But That is a disappointing element of the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just overstuffed again because I think the Ronin storyline is very good.
So do I.
But
again, I would say that's a character conflict. That's not the plot of the show.
True.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the inciting incident.
Yeah.
I guess that's true. No, that's true.
I'd say it's more of a B plot than anything, since our main character is, well, if depending on who you listen to, your main character is either Kate Bishop or Clint. So those A and B plots can sort of swap depending on who you view as the main character.
No, I agree because like most of his motivation for the majority of the narrative is staying in this fight because he's afraid that the Ronin identity is going to get his family killed, especially after you go to Maya's apartment and you find the list of like his kids and his wife and everything.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's quite important, but it gets backgrounded by the Jack and Elena stuff, which I think gets better as the show goes along.
Sure,
I agree.
But then fails to resolve literally any of it.
Yes.
And my biggest problem with that is Jack, because now correct me if I'm wrong, but Jack is just completely innocent. That's
from what we know. Yes.
Yeah, he
but
was
also
just,
from
he was just framed.
From the connection of him being a villain in the comics, no. But
fair, yeah.
But maybe because the MCU, yes.
Right.
I don't know.
That's the problem. Like he just ends up being, he can just kill people really nicely with a sword, but now he just cares about the blood on his tie. And goodbye, Jack. It's just like we start to gain a little bit of a relationship between Kate and Jack, especially after that scene where he sweeps their Famiga off her feet and they're dancing and he's singing her the song, and it's like a little moment about him not understanding American idioms. Like all of that is really good, but then it never matters because Kate never talks to Jack after the
He might
plot
come back
unravels.
in season 2. We never know.
And the plot also unravels via it's very Zack Snyderian the way that the plot resolves itself with like somebody watching a video file of just like facts pretty much. Like the whole framing of like, oh, hey, Yelena just texted me the plot resolution is like she might as well just send a text that says now begin the third act.
Oh, I see.
It feels very rushed. It feels very messy in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've comprehensively talked about every aspect of the Hawkeye series. If we missed anything, let us know down in the comments. We'll let you know our thoughts either there or in the Discord link in the description. But Abram he's raising his finger to raise another point. Good God.
I just want to talk about Yelena a little bit more particularly because I think we talked about her in a sort of a circumspect way, but I think tackling her directly, I really love the scene where she gets blipped and comes back. I think that's super jarring,
yes.
And it communicates her headspace really well.
Yeah.
And sort of her hunt for Clint, what was kind of like a who gives a shit post-credit scene in Black Widow, ended up being, I think, a really good arc for her. It made me care about that character a lot more when she kind of just felt like a stand-in almost in Black Widow. She really came into her own here.
I kind of disagree. I mean, this is a Black Widow comment, but I think the Black Widow movie was more about her than it was about Natasha. But that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
I do really love that we got to see the blip from a perspective of the person who was blipped.
Which we have before.
Have we?
Yeah, Monica Rambeau.
Oh, it wasn't like that though. This
was
was
Monica Rambeau.
It's a WandaVision thing.
You wouldn't know.
Remember like beginning of episode 3 or whatever when she's in the hospital and she shows back up and
but that was
mom
like
died.
This was like much more visually inventive and
that's a good point because there's no time that passes at all. That's one of the interesting things about it.
Whoosh, whoosh, and she's back. She's like, "What's going on? Whoa, what's going on?"
Yeah.
What was it? Slightly confusing for me though, going from the Black Widow post credits to this, because I was under the impression that Valentina Cortesa de Julia de Louise Dreyfus I'll never get her name right, so I'm just gonna mess it up every single time. Hired her to kill Clint, but I guess she's just like, "Hey, this guy is responsible for your sister's death. Go find someone who will hire you to kill him."
Well, that's the other thing. That is largely unresolved. So the mom hired Yelena, but that's never really unpacked either.
No. So it could be true or not. Who's to say?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It might just not be true. I don't remember. I'll rewatch it eventually, but someone brings up that it was Eleanor that hired her, but I don't know if that's ever confirmed from Eleanor herself.
Well, Kate confronts Eleanor with this information when she's being arrested. No, she does. Well, that's the thing. the easy script writing thing is, yes, I've got a shit ton of money and black market connections. I hired a Black Widow to keep my daughter out of trouble, to keep her life safe. I thought that was clearly the insinuation, but then the plot never addresses that.
No.
Yeah. Well, I think the complication is that whatever the fucking setup of the end credits of Black Widow was, that is another person who hired her.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
I think that the complication is that, Tanner, I would probably agree with you about Yelena being the main character of Black Widow, but I fucking do not remember that movie.
Fair enough. That's fair.
Well,
We'll get to it eventually for this show.
Here's the interesting thing about Yelena in this show, and why I do think that having seen her a second time now, I'm much more invested in the character.
Yes.
Is that learning about Yelena on her own, external from the connection to her family, or the family dynamic specifically, I mean, and seeing how she's dealing with the aftermath of figuring out that her sister is dead, and confronting Clint, who, one of the things that we know about Yelena as a person is that she is very protective of the idea of a relationship with her sister, of wanting to be the one that had a closest connection to her, even though that's just factually not true. And seeing her come to terms with that and have a conversation with Clint, who spent a lot more time with, frankly, knew Natasha a lot better than Yelena did. Like, there's a really good internal conflict for her. And now that that's resolved, it'll be interesting to see how she ends up going forward as a Black Widow character with a different kind of past, who is more emotional and headstrong, that is also tied into black market stuff and stuff. So I'm very interested in her character. And I think the way that she was brought back in this, and her personality from Black Widow was recontextualized in this show. I'm very excited to see what they do in the future. Yeah. And she's a phenomenal dynamic.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot fucking wait for the two of them to meet again.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, remember that time we made mac and cheese? Remember that time we fought in the fucking elevator or whatever? Great stuff.
Tucker might get his cake and eat it too in two instances there, because she's very clearly going to be like a member of the Dark Avengers that Julia Louise Dreyfus-Dick and Valentina or whatever is setting up. Unless
that's not just not a thing, because she was hired by a thing.
I'm presuming it's going to be a thing, but in which case she'll be probably talking again with Kate Bishop, because they have a great dynamic and the audience really glommed onto that, and John Walker, since he's also on that team.
God, so my cake is gonna be eaten so much. And
it's going to be had
and
eaten.
God, if I get a John Walker and Kate Bishop scene, I don't even know what I'll fucking do with my life. Holy shit!
Now, boys, I'd like to have my cake and eat it too by giving this a score. That's right, folks. We're giving this a score, despite the fact.
One more thing.
Good God, what is it, Abram?
I really like Clint's arm sleeve. Great tattoos.
I disagree. Abram, are you an Endgame hair defender?
No.
Do you like Clint's fucking weird ass cut?
His badger haircut or whatever the fuck
One
it
of
is.
my least favorite real world fashion trends has become the mullet with the undercut on the sides.
Oh.
And Clint was just he misunderstood that assignment.
Oh, how so true. So true, Queen.
His hair is great in this show. It's very comic book accurate and like the little sharp point that it comes to. But
he's got a faux hawk.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah,
he's got a faux hawk. Anyway, we're gonna rank and review that, or we're gonna rank and score this. No more fingers in the air. Get your fingers on the keyboard to type in your score.
I don't have it open.
Yeah.
So I actually do have one other thing to say. So that works out fine.
No. All right.
I was quite pleased with the dynamic between Clint and his family. One of my least favorite tropes across media like this is there's a significant other who feels betrayed by the other's commitment to their work.
Yeah.
I found it really refreshing that Laura was like, nobody is going to understand what you're doing more than me.
Yeah.
I think they had a really honest and genuine relationship, and the stupid, annoying children from the beginning of the show thankfully faded away.
Yes.
Until they came back really nicely.
It's nice that she's supportive, and clearly they have their history together. And who the fuck knows if we're going to get more payoff for that stupid watch thing. I think that's actually one of the elements of this show that was the least compelling, because it could have been foregrounded or developed in a more significant way.
Yeah.
But just turning it over and it has a shield logo on it. Fucking huzzah, I guess. Okay.
That's how they met. It's cute.
It's a shield thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter, but
his wife is a shield agent. Did I miss this?
The watch that was in the Avengers compound, it was apparently her watch, and it has a shield logo on the underside.
I mean, I gathered that much, but I didn't know if I was supposed to understand more than that.
I didn't either until Tanner said it now, and I think that's what's supposed to be insinuated.
Okay.
Though they were talking about they were talking about it belonging to someone he knew in like the third person though.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I just didn't quite understand
That watch thing is really confusing. I really thought that was going to be a bigger deal.
Yeah. Like I said, I maybe the Fantastic Four was shrunken down in there or something. I don't know.
I mean,
but anyway.
I can personally only enjoy media if it references future projects I haven't seen yet. So that was quite a disappointment for me.
Well, that's why you love Batman v Superman and opening the files and whatever. Let's give this goddamn thing a score. Okay.
I put
Does
my
everyone have
score
one
in.
typed in? Oh, 3, 2, 1, boop. You take all the showmanship out of it, and I really don't. I really don't appreciate that. But if we can run down the scores of this very quickly, going from highest to lowest, as we typically do. Tucker gave this an 8.4. Abrams very closely united with that with an 8.3, and I'm at a 7.7. Like I said, I thought that was a good show. You know, I think there were some elements that were a bit underserved, but by and large, good show. I'd rewatch it again eventually at some point. Maybe not immediately, but for our more mathematically inclined folks out there, that averages out to an 8.1, putting it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th place. How do you do that?
No, what?
It's gonna go at place
6
number 7.
6. No, 6, but it's 7 on
right
thing,
because
there's
there's
one.
Okay,
Yeah.
It goes above Iron Man 2 and below Captain America: The First Avenger, which I think is fair. You know, I think that's fine.
Tanner, do
I
you want to
think
make a graphic for this list so that whoever's watching
sure,
this fucking video
Can we
I
just
can-
make a letterbox list and put it in the description?
There is a letterbox list, and I'll put it in the
Oh,
description.
perfect. Here's what I want to say to close this dealio. It's actually a question for both of you and the audience. Regrettably, I'm not invested in watching these other shows.
Oh boy.
Which one should I watch next? Now, my feeling was that I should watch WandaVision. That comes straight from the mouth of God himself, John Tour 11, who wrote in the No Way Home comment section that I should really watch that to get ready for Doc Strange.
WandaVision.
Here's what I would say. I would say wait to watch WandaVision until Multiverse of Madness is closer, because obviously that leads directly into that. I feel like it would probably be more satisfying for that. And also, knowing you, I don't think you'd find the WandaVision like sort of background sword plot to be that compelling.
I don't think I would either.
Well, yeah,
and you might like the Westview stuff because it is visually charming, but I think Loki and Falcon Winter Soldier are much more your speed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Either or you want to watch both of them, but I do think that there's a chance you really like both of those quite a lot.
Yeah. It really just depends on what aspect of the MCU you enjoy more. Do you like the ground level sort of Captain America-y stuff? Or do you That was a quick answer. You didn't even let me give you the second option. But anyway.
Oh, maybe I'll watch What If.
Oh, man. You know, I mean, that might have some payoff in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness.
No, all you need to know is that Strange Supreme is a bad version of Doctor Strange.
Watch
you can just watch the episode.
Watch episode 1 and episode, was that 3 or 4? I think it's 4, right?
4,
Yeah. Those are the only important ones. And they're the best ones, but quite honestly.
Yes, it's true. Very true.
Okay. But folks, that's it. We went on some tangents. We were a bit rambly in this Hawkeye review, but we've ultimately gave it a score, like we'll be doing with the other Marvel series. By the way, we don't know which one is coming up next. We don't even know if we're gonna get one before Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
But regardless, we'll be there to talk about whatever MCU thing comes out next, and we hope that you'll be there as well. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
How often do you think about Cliff Blazinski?
I would listen to a long interview with him and David Jaffe recently.
Oh, popularly known as Cliffy B. That is literally the first thing on his Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a real thing.
Didn't he make that WAP song?
No, that was Ben Shapiro.